Most people think that podcasting is going to help them become a way, way, way better speaker. And unfortunately, I don't believe that it's true. Podcast Growth Nation, today for episode number 151. So you want to be a better speaker. I was on a call with a client right before this, and this client just crossed their 400th podcast episode. And this is a client who has very high standards for themselves and they have very big goals. So I get to coach them in a very unique way and we can kind of be hardcore behind the scenes, which is awesome. And this person said to me, I want to be a better speaker. What do I need to do? And I said, well, what are you currently doing? How do you prep for your episodes? I know you guys do some free virtual events and that type of stuff. How do you prep for that? And they said, well, we have a presentation that we do for these virtual events, but we also have some notes that only we can see that nobody else can see. And I said, okay, cool. Step one, can those notes. I said, you need to remove the safety net. The way you're prepping is going to determine the way you perform. And until we change the way we prep, we're most likely not going to change the way that we perform. So that was one takeaway that I had. The other takeaway that I had was this person has been podcasting for 400 episodes, and they're still not happy with their speaking ability. And I was thinking to myself, okay, it kind of makes sense. They're practicing podcasting, and they were doing that for the first 200 episodes. And yeah, maybe now over the last 200, they've been more focused on the art of speaking and pauses and storytelling and all that stuff. But that has to be a really, really, really conscious practice. So I said a couple things I want you to practice. I would like you to practice doing the 1-minute random word generator exercise. So go on a random word generator. And I got this from my buddy Eddie Panero, so I can't take credit for this. But go on a random word generator every single day, generate a random word, turn a timer on for a minute, and just go. And what you can do is you can do a hook, story, lesson, call to action. Practice that every day. I said what I think also would be beneficial is to practice some one-liners. So let's say you did an episode yesterday about vulnerability. If I said you only have one line to sell me on this episode, what would you say? That is a second little exercise. Because what I think is happening for a lot of us as podcasters, especially if you're doing an interview style podcast, you're not really practicing your speaking. You're practicing your interviewing. You're practicing coming up with questions. You're practicing active listening. There is a drastic difference between interviewing somebody and giving a speech. It's not the same exact set of skills. Yes, you're speaking and you're using your voice to convey a message. I understand, but it's different. They're very, very different things. Just like running a marathon is different than sprinting. They're different. The mechanics are different. Everything is different. I do neither, so I cannot speak eloquently on that, but just as an example. So it was really pressing and really telling that this person is 400 episodes in and they don't feel like they're where they need to be in terms of speaking. They're 400 podcast episodes in, and they've probably done, 50 to 60 speeches, quote unquote. What makes you a good podcaster, and at least in my opinion, and what makes you a good speaker are two different things. Being a good podcaster is being able to ask a question, pull a string, have some friendly banter, be an active listener. Yes, that's going to make you a good podcaster. What's going to make you a good speaker is storytelling, tonality, pauses, connecting dots for people, powerful lessons, analogies, all of that stuff. Those are different. Those are very, very, very different. That's why I think solo episodes are so powerful, and you're going to hear me talk about that from now until the end of time, or at least when it stops being valuable, but I don't think that's really ever going to happen. So if you're out there and you feel like you really want to level up your speaking, I don't think podcasting is enough. Now, you being on a guest episode, I do think is probably as, if not more valuable than if you do an interview, if you're the one hosting the interview. Because when somebody asks you a question you've never been asked before, essentially you're going to have to figure it out in real time. But the two best exercises I have found for this are the 1-minute random word generator and the you have 1 sentence to sell me on something. The 1 minute random word generator forces you to put a lot of stuff into a small container, but also it forces you to stretch 1 word into 60 seconds. So it does 2 things at the same time. The you have 1 sentence to sell me forces you to only use the most powerful words you can to get a point across. Those are 2 really, really, really good exercises. The third thing, and I had a client ask me this recently, they said, outside of just speaking more, how do I become a better speaker? You have to speak more. And you have to speak more intentionally. So you have to do exercises that you're not good at yet. I think speaking's this weird skill that eventually you get to a certain point where you feel comfortable speaking in front of people maybe, and it's easy to say, okay, now I need to still go to the next level. So that might mean, it's going to mean something different for everybody, right? For some people, it's going to be the hook, really hooking people in. You'll never believe what happened to me this weekend. It's a really good hook. For other people, it'll be the story, telling the actual story of what happened this weekend. Some people, it's the lesson. Well, what's the freaking point of the story? And then for some people, it's the call to action. Okay, now that I told you, hopefully, a powerful story that you listen to the majority of, where do I want you to go next? What do I want you to do next? Each of us has a strength in that, most likely, and each of us has at least 1 weakness. That is the next level for all of us. And if you can really level up your speaking, you're going to make a really good podcast guest. You can do solo episodes, and who knows what will come from that. I think it's really easy to get caught in this. The podcast is enough speaking practice for me, because in your mind, you're thinking, well, I'm already speaking more than most people. And that is factually correct. Yes. If you've done 100 podcast episodes, you have done more quote unquote public speaking than most people, for sure. But again, it's not the same. It's not apples to apples. You're not practicing the same skills. It's not maybe as intentional. You can edit it, so it's a little bit different. So that is one of the common traps that I see people fall into is, well, I'm doing an episode a week already. How much more could I speak? You could speak every day. If you were on your Instagram story, you could do that. You could do a TikTok video every day. It doesn't have to be edited nicely. You don't need any of the fancy stuff. If you want to level up your speaking, I would say you just speak more than other people, and more and way more than other people. Not just, well, I do 1 episode, now I'm doing 2. You're going to get better. It's just not going to be as much as it could be if you were really intentional about it. So that's one of the most common that's probably the most common trap that I see. The other part that I see, another common trap, is this is where a lot of people feel more comfortable doing interviews than they do solo episodes, so they would rather hide behind a guest than get out in front of themselves. I think that's a huge opportunity for us as podcasters. Many people, going back to the previous episode, we talked about this last week, many people start a podcast hosting and they have guests on and they never get to the place where they go outside of that. And I think eventually it's because interviewing gets easy. It's like, well, yeah, there's somebody there. I don't really have that much work to do. I know, but I don't think you're really going to improve that much. Not as much as you could if you were the head of the show, if you were the star of the show, if you were the only person adding value, so you had to figure out how to do it in a beautiful, powerful way. I think that's going to be a better practice. So that's the second most common trap. And then I think the third most common trap is not understanding how everything connects. So it's very easy to say, I don't have a lot of time. I want to do my podcast, and then I'm going to repurpose that for YouTube, and then I'm going to repurpose that for clips on social media, and I'm going to get a bunch of outputs from one input. Super valuable, and that's a really good way to look at things. But that does not actually help you create the skill of speaking. So what I would suggest is, instead of, or in addition to, using teaser clips from your episodes, especially if you do solo episodes, I would challenge you to just do a 1-minute video on the days your episodes come out. Because it's going to be better than the teaser clip's going to be. Because you're going to be able to do it in a more powerful way.
Next Level University and Kevin is exactly where you need to be if you're a podcaster. When I first started out just a few months ago, I had no clue on the direction I was going. I was getting hustled by another company that was giving me not even close to the value that Kevin and Next Level You was giving me. They literally changed the trajectory of my podcast, have helped me out tremendously. They understand the clients. I promise you, you will not go wrong with dealing with Kevin and Next Level You. I'll see you there.
That is an incredible way to do the hook, story, lesson, call to action. Okay, in this week's episode, this is what we talked about. Cool. So if I was going to do it live on this, right, let's do it for this. So this episode is So You Want to Be a Better Speaker. If I was to put 60 seconds on the clock and I had to do a hook, story, lesson, call to action, it would be this. Most people think that podcasting is going to help them level up their speaking, and honestly, it's not going to work to the degree you think. There's my hook. I was talking to a client recently who is 400 episodes into their podcast, and they're still not happy with their speaking ability. And it really blew my mind because they speak more than most people do, but they're not where they need to be. And one thing jumped off the page. The thing that jumped off the page was there's a big difference between podcasting and intentionally practicing your speaking. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. If you are struggling with this and you want to level this up, make sure you tune into the episode that drops tomorrow. It's So You Want to Be a Better Speaker. Boom. If you do that every day, or at least every time an episode drops, I'm telling you, you will level up your speaking. What is speaking? And again, I'm not going to go on some weird tangent here. What is speaking? Speaking is taking some sort of thought and then breaking it down into the amount of time you have and then getting it to land with people. Cool. What is the fear for most people when it comes to speaking? Forgetting what they want to say or running out of things to say. I think that is the biggest issue we have as speakers. What is one way to combat that? Practice speaking enough and you start to get, I say grooves. You start to get grooves where you just start saying a sentence and then you trust that the sentence will connect as you get closer to the end. I don't know how else to explain it. I think you can use your intuition more. You can use your unconscious mind more when you speak more. That's why one of the reasons I am so big on you guesting on other podcasts, even if it's one a week or one a month or whatever, is because you're going to be asked questions that you've never been asked, and you're going to be forced to answer questions you've never answered. And that's going to help you speak in real time. There's a drastic difference between prepping and having a PowerPoint or whatever it is, and then just speaking. And somebody saying, what are your thoughts on blank? And then you just go. There's no safety nets, there's no guidelines, there's no railings, you just go. The more you practice that on your own, the better off you're going to be. And again, what works best for me and what has worked for a lot of clients is breaking things up into hook, story, lesson, and call to action. So the hook gets somebody to lean in. The story is what gets the lesson to land. The lesson is the point. It's the takeaway. It's the value. And then the call to action is where do we want people to go after this? So takeaways from this episode. 1, start speaking more by yourself. Even if it's private, even if it's behind the scenes. I don't care if you just record a video on your phone and show nobody. That's a great place to start. It's very humbling. I had my client do this. I said, all right, we have 5 minutes left. I'm going to put up a word on the screen. I'm going to start a timer, and I want you to give me a minute and do a hook, story, lesson, call to action. And she was like 35 seconds in, and she said, oh my goodness, I am floundering. And I said, but that was a really strong, the first 20 seconds were really strong. And then you got in your head, and you fell off track a little bit. That's okay. I had a mentor who said this one time, the first time I ever told my story. He said, strong work, that's the worst you'll ever do it. Like, interesting. I never really thought of it that way. Believe it or not, I don't think it was the worst I've ever done it. I'm sure I've probably told it worse than that, but it's the same process and the same thought with this. One of the reasons we don't level up as speakers is because we're not willing to suck at speaking. And we think we're good because we podcast. You probably are better than most people. I will give you that. But as somebody who has done 20 or 3,000 at this point, 3,200 podcast episodes, a lot of the skills that I've been able to develop are what I have done after, before, or not on the microphone at all. A lot of the skills, if you want to be somebody who's really strong in the gym, yes, go weight train. But you also have to do mobility, and you have to get enough sleep, and you have to hydrate, and you have to eat the right amount, all that stuff. What you do before, after, and beyond the podcast is going to help you a ton. And if you want to be a better speaker, it most likely is not just going to come specifically from podcasting, unfortunately. Now, I know I'm asking for a lot, genuinely. I'm not saying that as a tease. I am asking for a lot. And a lot of the people I coach want to be full-time professional podcasters. This person has they're a clinician, but they make money from the podcast as well through coaching and stuff. They really, really, really want to become the best speaker they can be. So the level of feedback I give them is not necessarily the level of feedback I'm trying to give you. But I do think this is a skill that just pays dividends forever. You're way more confident. You feel like you're in way more control. It's just something we probably should practice every day. And it only takes a minute. If you could do it for a minute a day is not a big ask. You could hold your breath for a minute a day. Many people, maybe not everybody, but you can hold your breath for a minute a day. You can do this every single day for a minute. And then if you were to break that into a 1 minute not a one-liner, not a 1 minute one-liner, just a one-liner, 2 minutes. Maybe that should have been the title of this episode. How to increase your speaking 100 times with a 2-minute practice. I don't know if it's actually going to be 100 times, so I wouldn't do that, but that's my challenge. That is my challenge for you. If you're serious about podcasting and you're serious about speaking, and maybe one day you want to be a speaker, you want to be on stage, I think one of the things that helps speakers is understanding that even if everything, quote unquote, goes wrong, they still know what they're doing. And the only way to really do that is to just practice not knowing what you're doing for a long enough period of time. So that would be my challenge to each and every one of you if you so choose to accept it. So Google random word generator, set a timer for a minute, take that word, hook, story, lesson, call to action, and then after that, give a one-liner for that. And all a one-liner is just imagine it could end up on a quote card on social media. The biggest difference between who you are today and who you aspire to be is your habits. Something like that. What's the one? It's in a movie. I don't remember the movie. We fear our greatness more than it is not the dark that we fear, but how bright we shine or something like that. Like that's a really good one-liner. I'm convinced if you can get really good at one-liners, you can get really good at 1 minute. Getting good at 1 hour is not that hard. Because a 1 hour speech is essentially just a bunch of one-liners and minutes. That's really all it is. It's just a minute that's broken out longer. It's still going to be a bunch of hooks, stories, lessons, call to actions. It's still going to be all that. It's just broken out into a longer period of time. But it's essentially the same framework. So if you can take something complex and explain it in a minute, you can take something complex and spread it over an hour. If not, take something simple and then spread it over an hour. I think this is a skill that translates nicely. Cool. All right. If you are somebody who is trying to level up your speaking and you're not sure where to start, or you want to get weird behind the scenes and we can do the 1 minute random word generator together, that's always fun. I'll have my link in the show notes for a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session. And Podcast Growth Nation, our private Facebook group, is up and running. So if you're looking for a group of podcasters who are trying to get to the next level, they're trying to grow, scale, monetize, whatever it is, and maybe they're lonely in the journey, and you're lonely in the journey, we'll have the link in the show notes for that. I would love for you to join. There's posts every day. I'm in there. The team's in there. So yeah, we'd love to have you if you're looking for a group of amazing podcasters. I hope that your podcasting and your speaking are improving, but you understand that each of those is a unique skill. Now, yes, the skills carry over, but you got to practice them both, and I think the practice is different. So I hope you're practicing your speaking in a different way than you're practicing your podcasting. If you have a solo episode, based podcast, that's obviously a little bit different, easier to do. But if you have an interview style, you're probably not getting as good at speaking as you are interviewing. And I think that's fair. And I don't mean that in any negative way. All right, cool. Until next week, keep on crushing it, keep on podcasting, and I will talk to you all then.